overall, we have to be on a path to prosperity rather than on a path to bankruptcy and socialism. You know, we've seen a lot of things in the clips, and it's been mentioned before about who's going to be hurt. I talked about the welfare reform of '96 earlier. Everyone agrees that it was a success, but at the time, people were saying, you know, there was one Democrat senator who went on the floor of the U.S. Senate and said, 1 million kids are going to die in a year if you pass this. You know, these scare tactics and these, you know, the specter of people homeless in the streets, 10,000s of people, you know, what have you. I think that that's proven to be false in the past. The welfare reform, again, is a great example of that, and I think that it'll prove to be false again, because when we're on the road to prosperity, that we're talking about lifting people up from the bottom up and not tearing whoever we think happens to be a convenient target down.
Well, how about that, Joanna? That if we stop doing all these different things, eventually society will adjust.
I think in terms of the housing piece, I definitely think, and we're certainly hearing from our network, instances of homelessness increasing significantly, particularly among families. And that's not a 90s era phenomenon. That was an urban myth. That's happening today, now in our cities and communities across the country. Certainly, I think in times of full employment, where everyone who wants a job has one, we also saw increases in wages during those times. That's not the economy we're working with now. That's not what we have now. We have a time of where we're just coming out of a recession that's disproportionately impacted people of color, and it's going to take them a little bit longer to spring back. And I think those are things we have to keep in mind. I think we always frame economic growth in terms of dollars, taxes cut, and jobs created, but we need to start thinking about it in terms of our children and investing in them and helping parents be better parents so they can provide the resources that kids need to be productive. And those resources include education, health, and nutrition. And I just think that it's difficult to sort of say that those things are not important when they are.
A kid who's in kindergarten today is going to be paying the FICA taxes that fund my Social Security check. Now, I've got my fingers crossed that this is all going to work out and they're going to get educated and get a decent job so that there will be wages from which to take FICA to pay my Social Security check. I know you're independently wealthy, so you're not relying on that. But really, I mean, we do have a stake even in people we don't know and we've never met and are not likely to meet.
Absolutely, and that's what makes us different. We are not a pure everyone for himself economic engine. There is some degree of shared responsibility, as you put it, shared sacrifice, and we are all committed in some way, shape, or form to each other. It was very refreshing to hear the president lay out in his agenda for getting the budget under control last week that concept that we all have some degree of responsibility for each other, and the safety net exists for a purpose. Now, I would have liked to have seen him gone further, and I'd like to see him speak more about the importance of some of these programs going forward. But we do need to understand we live in a very polarized time, and in some sense you're seeing it on the panel this morning. But even more so, there are people out there who feel very strongly that we don't want a limited government, we want close to no government, the bare minimum. And then there are other folks who feel very strongly that government must have a significant role in their daily lives and plays a critical role for them. And that gap has broadened over the last 3, 4, 5 years in a way that's made it very hard for politicians, from the president to Majority Leader Cantor to Majority Leader Reid in the Senate.
But when that gap
come
is
together.
as broad as it is, can you even have a conversation?
You have to have a conversation.
Can you even come up with anything that makes sense to both sides of the table?
You're talking about hard choices. I mean, these are going to be hard choices. And that's why across-the-board cuts don't work, because they make those choices invisible. And that's what we elect our leaders to do, is to make hard choices. No one said this would be easy.
Hard choices, yeah, I get that it's hard choices, Joanna, but when people are so far apart that they can't even agree on the premise of the conversation, I don't know how you craft a policy out of that.
But the answer is, and how many Hollywood movies have you seen where they're standing on the edge of the cliff? These are two guys who have been beating the crap out of each other, for the last hour and a half of the movie, and because they are at the precipice, they come together and work together and come up with a solution. Now, that doesn't just happen in Hollywood movies. We've seen it in public policy before. We've had reasonable compromise with, the senior President Bush agreeing to revenue increases in 1990. With Bill Clinton and the Republican Congress agreeing on welfare reform as well as a deficit reduction package. It can happen again. It requires the right political window in time where we are facing that precipice. And I agree with Mario that we have to change the way we're doing things or we will be in trouble in the long term. And I think politicians understand that. But also a sense on both sides that both sides may need to do things here that are uncomfortable. To get to a final solution at the end of the day. I think the president has made clear he's pretty much there, and I'm hoping and I believe we're going to see that from the Republican leadership in the House going forward.